I've made perhaps the most consequential move in the defaults lifestyle strategy. And I thought we could have a little review session here, some early notes, kind of experience report, whatever the kids call it nowadays. I moved from the one password to the passwords.
Ooh.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It was super easy, and I feel like incredibly insecure. You basically export. Guess what you export from one password, Brandon?
CSV.
Exactly. You export it.
Of course, but of course.
The ultimate in enterprise security management formats. So you export that from one password, and then you just suck it into passwords. I think you can actually, maybe there's some other file format, but I think it might just be a CSV file. Whatever, doesn't matter. And surprisingly, it seems to work, which is fine. Now, the first thing that you'll notice, now you may fans of one password, and I know about the browser plugin. That's all cool and fine. That all works as you would expect it, not a problem. But you use one password, you click on a username or a password, and all it does is it copies it instantly for you, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think what the geniuses at one password figured out is 99.79% of the time when you do that, that's what you want to do. Now, they haven't. I don't think they did a lot of competitive analysis and thinking over there at Infinite Password Loop. But now in Password, you click on it, and it in an OSO. There's a lot to think and learn about Apple when you use the Passwords app. In a very Apple way, it brings one of those really annoying, I don't even know what you call it, little tooltip things that says copy that you then have to hover over to copy it. And it's just, I think that right there is kind of Hall of Fame representation of Apple thinking.
Like, what about, just give us I guess we should kind of go like almost like a little feature comparison. So how is it like automatically filling the password in on a web browser? Does it just kind of do it?
Like so far that's great.
And have you tested Google Chrome as well as Safari? Is it like just as good as Safari and not good in Chrome?
Well, I haven't really used Chrome. I don't really use Chrome. Okay,
so that's the question. What about one-time passwords? Does it, if you have one-time password set up, will it automatically?
Yeah, it sucked all that in from one password, and nice. And does all your 2FA stuff. So that's nice. And then adding it, you can add a code in, or you can add a picture. I don't know if I haven't actually tested it to see if it has that hovering screenshot thing on a desktop.
Does it take over the Authenticator app?
I mean, it is the Authenticator app.
No. It's holding the passwords, but also it'll do the 2FA. Like,
yeah. Absolutely.
So like one password, just like one password.
Yep.
I don't use that feature of one password, so I didn't know it was there.
Oh yeah. That's a nice feature of one password. And then what about credit cards? Like, and I've read that it doesn't have like native support for credit cards. It only does username password.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't have credit cards. So you have to store that in. I don't even know
your wallet.
Right. Yeah, that's probably what Apple wants you to do. Put it in the wallet, but then you can't. Like, I don't know how to autofill. Well, I've never autofilled a credit card from my Apple Wallet. I've only done it.
Definitely have. Only works in Safari, but yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if you have to add it to your wallet, that could be annoying.
And if you're shopping with Apple Pay, if you're shopping with Safari, Apple Pay will show up sometimes.
Now that's a separate thing. The Apple Pay Safari is absolutely
that's separate too, though. I mean, I sometimes it'll be like.
Yeah. I think this might be the problem that someone who bought like a way overpowered MacBook has, where it's just like, I've got a lot of credit cards, and do I need to keep track of them? What's going on there? I just need to winnow down to less credit cards. I probably don't need that American Airlines credit card anymore, let alone 2 of them. So maybe I should.
All right, but to recap your situation, you are 100% Apple household. There's no.
Now hold on. Did you say household? I haven't done that switch yet. Now
you've only migrated yourself.
Yeah, I mean, we just rolled out of FY26 strategy. I've sent the slides out in a Zoom recording, but I don't think anyone's bothered to type the password.
So this is just a tech proof of concept. You've just done it for one person, highly skilled in your household. The rest of the family, if they're using anything, they're using one password. Are they still in the old system?
I think now the only person who uses it is Kim, the CFO. And
so we need to get to somebody with buying authority, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, we need to bring her on. We need to have a whole session with her.
Now, lucky for the procurement conversation, the price is 0.
Yeah.
So
we have a champion. We need to move.
Now, what about let's go through your kids though. Like, this seems like an ideal time if the kids didn't, and they don't have to migrate, because it would just be like your son, right? He's certainly of age. Have you given him the password talk yet?
No, not yet, because he uses a crazy password that I can't remember, that is not legible.
Not good enough.
Which I know. I'm not defending it, but I think I'm focusing on him doing his schoolwork on time. And
where are the priorities? You have to teach the youth everything together. You know, you give up on this.
This is true. This is true. This is like the CISO's like, I know that you would like to add features that would allow people to buy products from our company, but wouldn't you also like to have good password policy?
I literally was driving like a car full of teenage girls the other day, and my daughter mentioned, oh, my dad works in software security, and they started grilling me about password, like their password habits. Like, is this a good password? It's the name of my dog and my birthday. Like, terrible password, right? No, it's like no.
Like, there's two password habits there that you broke. One, telling people what your password is.
Well, it's like different passwords for each website, nothing personal. And get yourself a nice password manager. You've got an iPhone, just upgrade, get the latest. It'll manage that stuff.
So Matt, really a question for you, because your kids are slightly older and you've been through it multiple times. But so many times everyone's children's school always wants people to come in and present and things like that. And I always thought, like, I could do a whole thing on security basically around passwords, right?
Oh, sure. That would be awesome.
And because I think you do a lot of stuff, like what's the most common password in the world? It's usually password.
And I'm sure your son would love for you to come and endorse.
Yeah, well, there's that whole thing. But then there's I think I can make it fun. But then what I've often resisted it, because it's like you're gonna come in conflict with the IT group of the school, right? Because the school always has like the duality of like, yes, everyone needs passwords, but then they have their own rules about this. Teachers need access and everyone needs access. So that's why I've always like not wanted to do that. Never wanted to walk in, because it felt like it's like an enterprise sale. Like you find yourself in there showing good ideas. The next thing you know, you got the director of school IT all up in you, telling you that what you're saying is wrong and is against policy. And then you've created a whole, a situation. So maybe that would be something for the listeners. If anyone's successfully given a security talk at a school, did it go well? And would you recommend doing it? Or is it like what I like to do with all those things around the school? It's like, I prefer to just give money and pay. I feel like that's what my main role.
Outsourcing.
I don't like interaction and actually doing stuff. I'm always like, anytime there's planning something, my initial thought is always like, I feel like there's a more efficient way we could be doing the thing at the school, but no one wants to hear that. So I feel like I should stay out of the conversation.
Stay in your lane, Brandon. Stay in your lane.
Right. That's what I have.
All they want to hear about when you go to school, the CSV export.
That's right. That's exactly right. So.
I think we've got in the works here I don't know the third one yet, but I think maybe we've got a 3-part kind of evergreen, annually updated series of presentations. Now, I'm gonna have to go work with the Software Defined Talk keynote division, public speaking bureau. But I think the first one is just going to be called Passwords. And it's going to be like Passwords 2024, Passwords 2025, you can imagine, right? And it's just sort of this like rolling 30 to 45 minute conversation. No fucking lightning talks. None of that. And, we'll get hired and we're going to tell you about passwords, state of the art, what you should be doing, fun little jokes and anecdotes, all about passwords. And then I think maybe the second one is going to be about CSV files. Now, this is a very high level, non-technical talk. We're not going to go over formatting and character sets. Guaranteed no Unicode or UTF talk here. UT8.
You're not going to have to escape anything?
No. Well, now, Matt, we might talk about when do you need to escape something. And that's going to be the advanced thing. It's going to be like, hey, everybody, we've gone through a lot here. I'm going to leave you with a bonus item that's something to think about for next year. Escaping characters. And by escaping characters, I don't mean ones that like leave your screen and you can't find them. In fact, it's the opposite. Ironically enough, when you escape a character, it's because you want to keep it. Think on that. See everyone next year. And I don't know. So we need to work on maybe the third one. I'm not maybe the third one. I don't know if it's about is it about podcasts, email. Maybe the third one is rotating, and this year the third one is about AI. And
I like it. Yeah. Oh, that would be even good. Well, I do I don't know. Maybe I'll give it some thought. Like I do think maybe I don't know, man. I almost need you to sponsor it. We get Wiz to sponsor, but like a generic password presentation, brought to you by Software Defined Talk and Wiz for middle schoolers, right? That's what we're going to create. And we put it out there for like everybody, like everyone listening to this, all the fathers, I'm going to speak specifically with gender a second, all the fathers who have not done anything at the school, you know who you are, right? You could take this presentation, you could go give it to your middle schoolers, and then you can check the box that you did something well. And then maybe everyone could report back whether or not they got in trouble with school IT for doing so.
This is making me, you bringing up the gender thing. I wonder if anyone has done gender studies about passwords. Like, are there different passwords, different password schemes? Which accounts are more secure or less secure? Who uses password managers or not? Turning on 2FA, just across the board.
Well, remember
if we bisect it by whatever kind of gender categories we can come up with, I'm sure there's many of them. We could look at the transition when you go through different genders. Does it change your password habits, or do you carry that over? That would almost be like a kind of natural experiment. That like is the gender identification, does that determine the password strategy or not? Right? Does it switch over when you
I bet it does.
No relation?
I bet gender does matter, because I do remember long time ago, I worked in online banking, and we did an export of the challenge questions. Yeah, it was users got to submit their own questions and answers for what their challenges were, completely free form. And so there were a lot of like, what's my favorite color and stuff like that, but also things like, which is my favorite child, and who would I leave my husband for? That could be men or women, but it probably skews more towards women. By the way, the answer: Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Oh my gosh! Oh
yes, that list was just it was so beautiful. So many good questions in there.
It was a gold mine of what happens when you hire $5 to $10 an hour teenagers to write your online banking.
I wanted to, as we close this topic, I do want to come back, and maybe the first thing I want the researchers to do is to figure out, like, why does anyone, from the first time they encounter like a password field, they're like, oh, I have an idea. I'll use my pet's name. No one will ever think of that. That is like the universal, like, I think if you ask the first grader, like, you got to come up with something secret, you got to remember it, they would come up with a pet's name. And so that seems to be the universal thing everyone starts with. And of course, that is the absolute, other than using the word password, that is usually the second worst password is your pet's name.
This is why when you look in the Little Busy CISO's book, number one transformation suggestion: don't hire people with pets. And you've already increased your risk posture by 5.7%. And
man, I tell you, if you finally found a topic that will displace return to office as being more controversial. If someone's like, we found that people without pets are more effective, and we will only be hiring people, I mean, that would finally be the moment that brought down the ivory tower.
Yeah. Well, I think, as you know, like you're saying, Brandon, I think this is something we need to think about a little bit. And Matt Ray, I think you can go back to Wiz and you can say, could you sponsor this initiative globally? Password awareness. We're going to start with the kids and just kind of go up from there. Maybe we'll do some university speaking.
I think you might be onto something. Yeah, we have a children's guide to security book, a coloring book. So
of course you do.
and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. We're having an ugly sweater contest.
I like that
for the holidays. So they're big on their swag game. They like to get the whole family involved. So maybe I'll run that up the flagpole.
I like it. Yeah. Make sure to title it "Parents Guide to Passwords" and then subtitle "No Pet Names Allowed." Right? That would be. And that's your opening slide, and then from there you can take it.
You'll be happy to know that every teenage girl had their pet's name in there.
I mean, without a doubt. Although I think that I believe that goes gender both ways. I think the boys just as likely, almost just as likely.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, speaking of places that you work or have worked, Matt Ray, it seems like the OpenCost thing is now in CNCF incubation. You've worked on that here and there. Give us the update on that. Does this mean that we'll finally have an open source way to track cloud costs?
Well, we had
what
one.
do we got going on here?
I'm happy to announce the OpenCost project that I used to work on. I'm now listed as a maintainer emeritus. So
wow.
Yeah.
You still get a parking space?
Virtually. I still get people asking me questions in Slack. Yeah. So they advanced from the CNCF sandbox to the CNCF incubation, which means in addition to more parking spaces, it gets them a nicer booth at KubeCon. It gets them some more marketing exposure through the CNCF, more webinars and that kind of stuff. But it's also kind of a signal to the market that ostensibly this is not a single vendor dominated open source project. It's got production usage by people not commercially involved, and it's not graduated yet. That's the next tier, but it's on its way to being a healthy project, and so it's good.
So on that, I guess a couple things I wanted to ask you about. Now, OpenCost, is it just Kubernetes cost data, or is it now it's all cost data? So why don't you give us the what data, if I support OpenCost, what data can I export out of it?
Right. So it started what was originally contributed to the CNCF was the Kubernetes cost allocation engine, which would say, here are the incoming costs, and here's the cost of a bunch of EC2 instances and storage and load balancers and the like. And this is what AWS says they cost. And we would watch your Kubernetes cluster and every minute track what's happened, right? You got this many pods, this much action, this much CPU usage. And then, you could just run reports against it. We'd export the data into Prometheus. And that's it. It was a Kubernetes reporting engine.
Right.
And then later on, obviously, CSV export had to show up, as well as support for what's the big Apache format. Anyway, other export formats showed up, and then they added support for ingesting the cost and usage reports. And so cost and usage reports are the big bills that show up from AWS and Azure and GCP that have the fine-grained costs of the actual costs, where you've got sustained discount usage, reserved instances, all sorts of negotiated, pricing. That all got rolled in where it could ingest those files, and it didn't export them as Prometheus, but it did put an API on them, which there's, as far as I know, there's not really any other open source stuff that was maintained that did that. So you had the ability to ingest your cloud bills and your Kubernetes costs, and then they also right before I left added plugin support for ingesting other stuff, and Datadog was the first example. Yeah, and I think Mongo Atlas might be in there now, and I'm not paying that close attention, but
well, which ones? I know AWS. I remember AWS came out and said they supported this a while back. Is that correct, or am I misremembering?
Supported
OpenCost. I thought they
yeah, I mean, it was they supported the creation of the project, like the standard, because it also
I thought I saw where they would actually export it now in that format. Maybe I'm all right. Maybe
well, I mean, OpenCost just eats AWS stuff natively.
Okay.
But Azure did take the OpenCost engine and put it into their billing engine. So now in Azure, you can actually see your Kubernetes cost down to the pod level. At the container level, and see how your Azure bill gets split across, and that was that's OpenCost inside its Azure AKS cost analysis is that product. Is that
all right? So
right?
I wanted to get your take, man, on a couple of things on this, because it's sort of like you've done all the work now. I shouldn't say you. The project has done all the work to get all this cost data out there. It feels like now everyone has at least the ability to like see what they're spending. Now, last week, for those that listened to it, I interviewed Aran from
that was good.
Coursera. And so they're kind of taking it to the next level. And I just wanted your take on like, this is where it should go. So it's like, let's just say collectively, the industry is now like, okay, we can at least get all the cost data and now see it. Now they're kind of going to the next level and saying, okay, that's great. You've kind of managing your costs, but what you really want next is to like, if you will, save even more money. And the real short story was, they basically provide a service by which if you want to get the best prices, you got to usually sign, a 1 to 3 year deal, sign up for reserved instances from your various clouds, and you lock in lower prices. Of course, you trade that off against longer commitments. Now, their pitch is sort of like buying insurance, or almost looking at it like a commodity, saying like, hey, if you're worried about that, like maybe you won't need the capacity for 3 years and you won't use it, you can, if you will, sign up for their insurance. And that will, if you will, allow you to reclaim cost, or, if you turns out like your startup doesn't blow up, right? You don't need the extra capacity, or like for whatever reason. And I guess where I'm going with this is like, do you think is this like the natural next step? It's almost like if this would be like a Matt Levine, from Bloomberg writing about like how, let's just take like an airline wants to like, is worried about its fuel cost, right? So there's all this idea of like buying futures and locking in prices, but really the airline's just trying to like protect itself. So are we going this direction? Like, do you think this is the right way to?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the interview was fascinating, because at the lowest level, OpenCost is just reporting, right? We're just, here are the numbers. And then you had kind of the next level up, which is like, and banking, it would be similar to like accounting, it's like, or, actuarial, like, if we spent a little less here, we could optimize. It's optimization, right? OpenCost was never about optimization. It was just about getting those numbers into a consumable format. And so you had people like, oh, now that I have quality data, I can make informed decisions about it. And then what they were doing was almost like kind of the quant angle of like, oh, you know what, we can do like, trading, we could start trading on this stuff and slicing it up into risk profiles. And, it's just like next level. And I thought that was great. And so in that model, OpenCost would be down at the bottom of their stack, right? It's just like, look, this is table stakes, grunt work. Nobody should be differentiating on how they parse billing data, right? That is not a competitive feature, And so it's very utility, which to me is a great use of open source, where lots of people can collaborate on the same thing, because nobody's really competing on that.
Right.
That, it's literally like saying, I compete on, my ASCII character set. Right. It's like,
so no, you see in the future, like we can imagine a world where like the Chicago commodities market, like you can trade energy, you can trade soybeans, you can trade futures for fuel. Like you can almost imagine there being like, I don't know, compute, some unit of compute, like an hour, and where it's sort of like, someone's gone to Amazon and bought up all these, these contracts, but they're really just reselling it if it's higher.
I mean, you already have markets like that around AI compute, right? So and I think that's just because that has more volatility and higher costs. But so you get naturally you're going to get a speculative market there, because people are like, there's money to be made here by triaging, supply and demand, or not triage, but by playing with the supply and demand of these markets. And if you put that on top of it, you have that general cloud costs, a little less, arbitragey, but it could happen.
All right. Well, this is what I want to see what happens. Will one day the streams cross? Will Matt Levine write about some like weird cloud cost trading situation like he writes about? Does it not feel like we've really made it if this idea? Because I don't know. I left the interview thinking like cool idea. I was like, cool idea. But I was just like, I just don't know if like how much people feel like the need to do that. Whereas like an airline is really worried about fuel costs. Whereas like compute costs, like, but you're right. Your point about like, as they get bigger and bigger, especially around AI.
As it gets bigger and bigger, I mean, airlines
find some way to protect it. So
I mean, the airlines are caring about their fuel costs because it's half their budget or something.
Yeah, it's a huge impact on their profitability. Yeah,
but when you look at some of these large internet properties that are spending tens of millions of dollars a month on cloud compute. It's like, yeah, I could see a market emerging where, you know, they're just because there's that much money floating around, if there's an opportunity to save money and, you know, make money off of saving people money, that I think that could emerge.
All right, cool. All right. Well, the other thing I wanted to ask you, unrelated to necessarily cost, but I just think because you kind of, you know, if you will, if you didn't go through the process, you were adjacent to the process. It's like Linkerd come up a lot in the software defined talk chat and things like that. So I'll try to summarize it as much as a very neutral way. Is sort of like people, Linkerd was all the way graduated, right?
Yep.
But then for the most part was only, if you will, supported by one vendor. And then of course we covered this before, that one vendor decided not to, if you will, make the Linkerd deliverables available, and you have to go to Buoyant to get that, right? So yeah. I've seen a lot of stuff that people feel like the CNCF potentially did not do its job here, right? That the fact that they allowed this project to get into this state, and that's frustrated some people. So I don't know. So I just wanted, as you're kind of going through it, like, one, I don't know if you have an opinion on that, I'd like to hear it, but two, it's sort of like, as you're now, if you were going into you know, incubation, right? I guess, right? It's like, are they, if you will, is the CNCF like holding, you know, the project accountable? Like, what are you seeing from the inside? And are you worried about like this happening? You know, KubeCost has been acquired, right? And like, yeah. You know, are you like, do you have a sense of like, is this going to work as the project, you know, if you will, tries to get graduated?
I mean, I think they are far from graduation. There is a whole CNCF process that you have to do a lot of the, you know, literally due diligence of proving that you deserve to move from sandbox to incubation. And there are definitely projects that have gotten pushed back, delayed, you know, told no. And it's not a fast process by any means. And so it takes a long time. And, you know, part of it is just the natural bureaucracy, but also I think that insulates the CNCF a bit from fly-by-night companies that, you know, go under, get acquired, whatever. And, you know, the CNCF is left holding the bag on a project that is essentially dead. There are a few examples of that. They've, you know, delisted projects because the startups are gone and nobody's maintaining them.
Okay, so there is a process. If you went,
there is a process.
Graduated and then delisted, though. Is that a process?
Yeah. Like Microsoft had a service mesh that they said we don't want to support anymore, and we would, you know, we're not going to maintain, and we want this removed.
Okay. So you can remove things. Okay.
Yeah, and I think I don't know if they've done it to a couple of other projects, but, you know, it definitely gets talked about in CNCF circles.
Like, but there isn't like a recertification. Like once you've been graduated, it's like, I think
that's what I think might be missing. Yeah, okay. I think there's not like a you know, a sunset clause on projects where they're like, you know what, you're not you don't qualify for graduation anymore. I think that might be what's missing. And I think, you know, from the outside, Linkerd is actually pretty healthy right now. They've got, you know, according to, you know, their blog posts, they're able to pay for more maintainers. The number of
this is Buoyant company,
yeah,
right?
This is Buoyant, right?
It's not Linkerd. I mean, they're not.
Well, yeah, and so
one in the same, but they're not one in the same. I don't know, you know,
right? Because they had multiple maintainers from multiple companies that got them into graduation, and then those other maintainers kind of fell off, and now it's just Buoyant. And, you know, I think my reading of it was, well, you know, that's not what they want graduated projects to be. They don't want them to be single vendor supported. And so if that's the way it is, you know, there's no harm in dropping them out of graduated back into incubation until they get more diverse maintainership. But I just don't think they have a process for that.
Yeah, no, well, this will be interesting to see, because I think that's what people, when I see people talking about it, and I know that there's like a strong Istio community, of course, that I think there's like some natural rivalry there, and they kind of point this out a lot. I have no, like, all service mesh, I have no stake in this. I really don't.
No,
like, I'm not a like active user of it, so I don't. But I do. So maybe that'll be the ultimate thing. Is like, it's really not so much graduation, because that sort of like feels like it never gets it's more like certification or something like that, or annual.
Yeah.
Like, you've passed your annual audit for this amount of years, but we're going to look at you every few years And if so, we'll drop it down, because it seems like that's because it is like, I kind of look at it. I guess the reason I was coming in, it's more sympathetic to the CNCF. It's like, I don't know. It's almost like, again, in graduation, it's almost like, well, they took the test, they passed.
Yeah.
We gave them everything and we're done. But I don't
know.
I
mean, it needs to be more like, it needs to be like a license. You're licensed as a graduated project for 8 years, and we have to re-up you after that, or almost like a medical license or something. Like, you have to prove that you're still capable of being a CNCF graduated project. And that can probably go for like incubation and sandbox too, because you've seen the size of the CNCF landscape. There's too much stuff, and some of it, once you dig a little bit into it, you're like, this is barely maintained.
Yeah, like a culling process would be pretty good. Well, listen, I know a bunch of people from the CNCF listen to the show, or friends of the CNCF. So if we got anything wrong here, write in and tell us. I don't know if there is. Well, I know there is a process like this, but I know it's come up a bunch. So
what I'd be interested in knowing is, I mean, maybe they don't have these kind of conversations, but with that volume of projects, there must be internally like an acceptable rate of fuck upness, right? Where it's just like, I don't know, if 10% of these things are kind of fucked, it's fine. Right. Like,
well,
but that would be the realistic thing, is like, there's probably, I'm guessing, at least 3 to 5 projects that are kind of like, I don't know what's going on here. Right.
Definitely. It's almost like venture capital, where, they're putting in, they're investing in lots of sandbox projects, lots of, potential ideas that could pay off and be useful to a lot of people. And sometimes they're like, you know what? You could stay in the sandbox because nobody, that's just not, that idea is never going to be incubated to graduation. So yeah, I think it creates a good ecosystem. And I hated the bureaucracy of it while I was dealing with it, but it does serve the CNCF a purpose, right? You don't want to just immediately push things through, but at the same time, I could say as a maintainer, is like, it felt like it slowed down our acceptance into a lot of conversations, where OpenCost at the time was healthier than a lot of incubation projects. And I could pull up stats and show, like, we're better than everything except for Backstage, when we were both in sandbox together, and Backstage got in really fast. And but everything else, I was just like, really, we still have to take this much time? And because it's signaling to other maintainers and potential contributors, like, this project has legs, and moving out of sandbox gets you more access to more people. That's all there is to it. And graduation, I don't know, means even more.
Yeah, there must be some sort of like behavioral libertarian economist theory that, like, the more successful and the more momentum that any group has that's doing this kind of certification, the more valuable it is for a certification to be annoying. Right. Because like, you want it to be easy at first because you have no projects. So you want to attract a certain amount of projects and funding. So you got to kind of get it off the ground. But then once your certification of something becomes a strategically valuable to users, and also creators of it, then if you're more stringent, then that value goes up if it's even harder to get through. Right. Like that you I don't know. So maybe it should be onerous and difficult, and even more so. And then people will be like, oh yeah, it's certified. Lock in avoidance. Let's do it.
Yes.
Go after it. Well, also, speaking of things that are not related at all to this, well, there is KubeCon going on at the moment. I haven't scanned the headlines to see what's going on there. Maybe there's something awesome happening. Maybe next week, maybe we'll have to catch up. But it looks hopeful. I don't know why this is, but there's a bunch of acquisitions that have been going on. Now, I don't know if this means that there's more money sloshing around, but I did see, Apple doesn't buy stuff every now and then, let alone something like, I use Pixelmator a little bit. Do you use that, Brandon?
I do. I love it. I love Pixelmator. Yeah. It's one of these acquisition announcements that actually gets my attention because I'm scared. Feels like Apple, often acquires it, and this, they take the features and just put it in some other part of the the Apple ecosystem and you lose your great little utility. You know, see, dark sky was like a good example of that.
Ah, yes, and then it just becomes a long press on a photo, and that's about it.
Well, I would say the reason I love Pixelmator is it's essentially, I don't think they would say it this way, but it's basically like cheaper Photoshop, or Photoshop done the Apple way.
Light.
And what's great about it is it's just a one-time fee. And like Photoshop, of course, is like part of the Adobe thing, and you have to get the subscription. And it's like, you wanted to crop one photo and you just agreed to a $2,000 ELA, right? And it's like with Pixelmator, it's like because I like it, but I probably use like less than 10% of the features, but I'm very satisfied. Like everything I want to do with a photo, I can do in there. And then there's a million, and I always know it's at least possible to do the thing that I want. I'm sure it does it if I just take some time to learn it. So I don't know. I feel like, in fact, I was going to mention this in the picks recommendations, but like, yeah, if you have any need to do even basic photo stuff, I would grab a copy of Pixelmator before it's if you will, stops being sold. Now, there is the very optimistic take would be maybe they make it like part of like their a free, like kind of like the Apple has what is it, Pages, and it has like what's the I can never remember.
No, not sheets, numbers,
right? It would be great if they had like whatever you want to call it, like photo images or something, because that would be fantastic if they just like, oh, everybody needs this. But I'm realistic that seems unlikely. But I like it. I'm worried about it, and congratulations to the Pixelmator team. I guess they probably made tons of money, but don't leave a copy out there for us somewhere.
Yeah, that's reminding me when y'all were discussing the I don't know, setting up an Enron for like cloud purchasing or whatever.
Hey, like the good kind of Enron.
It was making me think like, I don't want to, well, I do want to be, but like, to be a little like Wilford Brimley selling oatmeal. It seems like, man, whatever happened to just buying computers? Like you get the computer, and now you have it.
Go talk to your buddy DHH, and he'll tell you all about it.
And it's similar to the I get it. You want to sell a subscription because you want people to pay you money each year, or you could just release new software that they upgrade to, which also seems to work. But I guess I don't know. People like subscriptions. I certainly like them, or pay for them. But it does. I do. That is as you point out, Brandon. The instant that I see an app or whatever that I can pay a one-time fee for, I'm like $15. Yes, I want it, and therefore I don't have to keep paying. I'm happy to pay for that thing. Now, there's several other acquisitions. You got Red Hat buying Neural Magic. I have no idea what they do. Must be.
I can give you the quick one on this one. Fantastic name, Neural Magic. Like, it had to be someone at Apple. Anytime you put magic in there. But I did the reading I did, which was not much, but essentially it will help you optimize, if you will, these AI workloads to run on general purpose computers. So easy to say, right? And it's like, I think everyone gets it. I think it will require, because they then link to like several research papers, which I did not read. So I don't know. Like, I don't know if these optimization techniques are like how defensible they are, or if like, ultimately everyone will do this going forward. But it's kind of an interesting sense of like, it's obvious where the Red Hat's trying to take it. It's like, hey, we want you to run all the workloads locally. Apple has the same position. So I can see why there's a lot of interest in these optimization stuff. But I just don't know. It's kind of back to this Pixelmator. Is it something they just buy and they just like incorporate in the development or deployment of this stuff? Because it seems weird that you would like buy this on top of like, I want, like, what would you buy? Like, I have a LLM I want to use, and then I want you to optimize it for me. It feels like, oh, you would just do all of that like behind the scenes. So interesting technology or interesting ideas. I would love for maybe someone can either point out a podcast or tell someone to come on this podcast to explain like, what does it actually mean? And like, why is that optimization better than any of the optimization that OpenAI is going to do or Google's going to do? Because it feels like everybody's like researching this area. So there you go. There's the Cliff Notes version as I understand it.
Well, that makes sense. Well, there's a big rush for like private AI, running it on premises, doing your own stuff. So whatever tool chain or stack of things that one might need to do that, I think people would be scrambling to buy it.
And Red Hat has a project called Instruct Lab that is about like creating LLM. You're training up LLMs and evaluating them through open source, so I guess they're using some of the, Hugging Face or some of the other open source models, but I can see it like kind of playing into that, where they're like, look, we've got an LLM builder, this Instruct Lab things, and Neural Magic will help, schedule it and get it onto, appropriate machines. And so it becomes definitely the on-prem tool. So it's not completely out of the blue for what Red Hat's already been doing.
Yeah, it's brain wizardry in action. We'll see how it pans out. And then also, as always, Red Hat is this magical exception to every rule and principle. It's an open source business that works out. Everything's fine. And according to reports, we'll assume there's true. I don't know what reports means. According to some stuff that we read, it seems like the Red Hat acquisition is going to pay itself off. It's going to give a good return. So the acquisition seems to have worked out well. So maybe we need to update our slide deck and be like, hey, are you a Red Hat, the one exception to every rule? If not, when you hire the software-defined TOC M&A counsel, you should accept our constant, well-regarded advice. Next slide. No.
Although, okay, I want to throw it out because maybe here's the one exception. Okay, on the acquisition was like, okay, you have a ton of cash, right? And what you could do, like maybe many people listening to this, maybe in their personal lives when they invest, they're like, I don't know how to pick stocks, so I'm just going to invest it in an index fund, right? And over time, those usually do better than if you try to do it yourself. Now, a company can't really do that. They can't just be like, we don't have any good ideas. Let's just put it in an index fund. Although that may many times be the financially smart move. Because when you dig into this, what I think you can basically figure out is like, I think the Red Hat acquisition, you could say sort of under appreciated the S&P 500, but at least appreciated. So if you were just like IBM, you're like, I've got this money, I want to invest somewhere and I want to get some return. It's almost like you just want to buy a company that's sort of going to kind of track the overall market, and then you can just like claim a win, right? Because you didn't have anything else to do with the cash, right? Rather than try to like invest it in your own ideas that are very highly speculative and things like that. So it's almost like index investing at the corporate level through acquisition. You just kind of quietly buy something that throws that off. So I don't know. What do you think? I mean, obviously there's a lot of volatility there. You could buy the thing and it just completely goes bad, but Red Hat seemed like a pretty safe acquisition. I don't know. Should we put that in the deck, or is that sort of too
I think that, I mean, this is an interesting category that you're creating here, Brandon. And I feel like I'd like to go back and study it this summer when we get the interns in. But I think maybe if we look at Dell, I think Dell might be doing something here that's interesting, right? Lots of interesting established companies come and go from the Dell world. They're keyed into obviously doing a lot of like pay attention to the revenue stream, the stability of this. Let's just shift things around. I think that might be a different model, but you are getting at something. Maybe the tech world, the tech industry is finally old enough that you can have like a steady state kind of commodity business, right? In the same sense of like, toothpaste. It's just like, we can all agree on toothpaste, hopefully. And like, if you want to grow your, consumer packaged goods thing, then really you just buy successful companies when they're purchasable. And that's it. Like, you're not really looking for like toothpaste synergies, like anything like that. Like, it's just like, you just buy the thing when it's affordable, and then it just keeps doing its thing, and it's fine.
It's fascinating you said, because the two companies that come to mind, Oracle and Dell, are the ones that kind of do this, right? And I think Dell, I mean, we'd really have to go through the history, but Dell may be the one that has done it at the grandest scale. It was like, oh, we've got this money. I mean, they bought, I think to your point, they bought so many different things, and then they spun them out of lots of different ways. But I think it would be interesting to have one of the interns go back and be like, okay, take all the money Dell did that, and if you just put that money in an index fund, how would that have tracked versus like all the things they bought and sold, like EMC, VMware, all the security stuff, the list goes on and on. Like, how will it have worked out? Because there is, I mean, this is probably the thing that is criticized, maybe rightfully so, is just around like just the financialization of like, at this level. It's just like at some point it just becomes like everyone's just buying and selling logos, but like no new software is being created. Like everything is just the same. And it's just kind of shells. So maybe that's like the real negative way to look at it. But I guess the other way to look at it is just like, you have excess cash. You can either do two things. You can like do three things: issue a dividend, do a stock buyback, or buy really predictable revenue streams that kind of track like other stocks. And then that's a way to, if you will make more money. And then of course there's like, invent the next greatest product like the iPhone and make millions of dollars. But of course that's the hardest and almost impossible to do.
So difficult. Who wants to do that job? That's that sounds dicey. Now, also Sneak, that's how you pronounce it, right? They bought a company, the Dynamic Application Security Testing people or whatever. Now that's great for them. I'm sure it's fascinating, but this provokes a question in my mind. Now that you're full-on security thought leader, Matt Ray.
Yes.
How's those Sneak people doing?
I don't think I should talk about it really. I don't know anything about their financials, but they're definitely competitive adjacent to my current employer.
Right.
Well,
okay.
I would say information. I know Matt can't speak about it, but I would say, like this is just the path all security companies go. Sneak started like in the niche container, if you will, security. And that's kind of that container hardening. And it's just kind of what we were saying before. Like you kind of reach your limits on like what you think you can get as your addressable market there. And every security company eventually wants to become a testing company first, right? And they add that. And then the next thing they're going to get into is some type of dashboard, right? Some type of security event management tool. And then finally, they want to get into some observability or dare I say monitoring. So it's like, this is like, they're all like monitoring. Observability is always trying to push into security. Security is always trying to push into like monitoring, and testing is really, if you will, it's like the adopted child no one loves. It's just this bridge that like people like kind of move between. So I think I would just look at it like, well, this is like Sneak figuring out that their value proposition needs to be bigger. And that's why they're augmenting, because this looks like a classic tuck-in acquisition. This team in, I think it was Portugal got bought. I expect that to just be like, put on the burger chart, the architectural diagram, right on the price list, and it'll be something new for the Sneak sales team to go sell.
Yeah, I like that. Tuck in some pearls, see how it works out.
Well, it's a feature set in the part of the software delivery chain that nobody wants to pay for, which is things that developers use. Right. So it's like, I mean, I don't know anything about the company, but it's a competitive space. There are a lot of tools that do DAST and SAST, and but yeah, it's Sneak is a bigger offering, and so this is just more features for their offering.
Right. And I think, it would be interesting. I know we have some friends over at ChainGuard. It'd be interesting there because like different approaches here. Because as I understand, Sneak's all about like helping you to secure your own containers. Like, ChainGuard is like, here's the library of all the hard.
Yeah.
Why are you doing all that work? Right. It's kind of back to Kote, it's like, I don't want to do anything. It's like, just give me the hardened container. I don't really want to build hardened containers. So I mean, that's another.
It's good stuff. Yeah. I actually had a customer who's using ChainGuard, and they literally dropped like 30,000 vulnerabilities overnight.
Yeah. Well, because think about it. Like you're sitting there and like, there's two things can be done. Someone like gives you like, it's almost like someone giving you a mop, being like, here's a nice new mop. You can go clean all the rooms for you. Right. And that's, I feel like that's a little bit kind of on the Sneak side. And then ChainGuard's like, if you want, we'll just, the rooms are all clean here. We're done. If you just want to use it. And you're like, you know what I'll do? Exactly. I'll do that. I'll go over there and let them figure out all these. Cause like the problem is keeping all these vulnerabilities. Like, I don't think it's the tool necessarily that is hard to learn. It's like, how do I figure out what all these vulnerabilities are and like what to build in and how do I keep all of that up to date? And like, no one wants to do that. It's like one of their 7 other jobs they have at their company. It's like, just let ChainGuard does it. And then if it doesn't work out, you just yell at ChainGuard, right? You're just like, hey, you guys, you said you're going to do this and you didn't fix it. You're the problem.
So what's y'all's sense for maybe this, I don't know what you would call it, securing containers and cloud native application workflow bullshit market window, like closing, like over the next 12 months, are companies just going to be acquired right and left, and it's just going to become another thing that various stacks do? Or is this going to be like an independent bunch of little people figuring it out market? Or are we going full on it's going to be a little link underneath the product tab, and you click down on another link and it's under that link, or it's part of a solution? because all these companies have been around for a while now, and I think they're kind of sorting it out. But I don't know. I don't follow the space closely, except for the advice for CISOs about not hiring people with pets.
Well, security, like monitoring, management, and all these things. I mean, these markets are as old as time, right? It's like what'll happen is like as these, and I think you're seeing it, like this is a good example. Either these smaller companies will get big, right? Like Sneak will acquire other testing, and they'll buy some of the other things I just mentioned, like security event management and others. They'll either kind of aggregate that, or they will be if you will, subsumed by other large companies who will start to package it all together, right? And I don't know, maybe we could think of a really exciting startup in security that seems to be doing really well right now. If we just like think of something like maybe one of those companies that got a really large acquisition offer, maybe they're in the process of trying to do that, right? But that has to be balanced against all the other vendors we just talked about. And so to circle back to what we were talking about before, it's like you always have the Dell, the Oracles, the very large companies out there that if there is a predictable revenue stream around security, they'll all be plucked up, because that is the exact kind of stuff enterprise salespeople are built to sell. Walk in, don't you need it all? Don't you need container security? Don't you need security event management? Don't you need, the list goes on and on. So I don't think these are not going away anytime soon. The natural evolution will happen as always.
Well, I've got two more things I want to mention before we move on. Well, for one thing, there's all sorts of other stuff we kept track of here. And if you want to go read about things we didn't mention that were kind of generated by ourselves or in the community that we have, generated, which is to say collected and cut and pasted as a link, not effectively generated. But you can go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/493, look at those links. All sorts of exciting stuff going on. Big earnings from the cloud people, ongoing thrill fest in WordPress land, things like that. All sorts of other nonsense. But if you go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/493, you can check out all of those links. Tons of stuff in there. Now, the two things are, one, we had here at VMware Tanzu by Broadcom and VMware, whatever. We had our big event in Europe, Explore EU in Barcelona. I was there quite some time last week. There's a good, actually a pretty, by standards of keynotes, a very clear, concise keynote that you can go watch, just going over the whole, what I would characterize as like VMware is all about running your private cloud stack nowadays, from IaaS to PaaS, and that's primarily the focus. There's a good overview of that in the keynote. And then also, I was on the Cloud Foundry Weekly podcast that some of my coworkers do, and I gave my sort of like exegesis. I don't know. It was probably about 3 p.m., so I wasn't quite as tired as I am usually, going over what I think the deal is and what I thought about it. We can put a link to that if you want to see the overview of my thoughts on Explore. But yeah, it was fun. It was good to talk with people who use our stuff. I had a panel on AI with some people from Mercedes, and talk with someone else that I've gotten to know at NatWest, how they run their platform stuff, big UK bank, all sorts of things like that. And there's also a link, if you're wondering what exactly Tanzu is and you're thinking that it's Kubernetes, you should check out the link to read some clarification on that at softwaredefinedtalk.com/493. And we'll put that in there. Now, the second thing I want to mention, and it could spawn more of us talking, but I think when it comes to the return to office stuff, here's what I want to propose. Now, we always try to close out us and our friend, at the Cloudcast, Brian, and things like that. We always try to say, like, we're not going to talk about open source's business again, but then we do the next week. It always comes up. Now, I think for return to office, we're going to have the same arrangement where we're going to try not to talk about it. And my suggestion is that why don't we set a clock, a reminder? We could use the Apple Reminders app, because it's always going to be there, just like that U2 album you can never get rid of. But maybe in 12 months, we should check in, because I think we've set up an experiment to see if it matters or not, right? So you got all these tech companies making people come back to the office. Maybe, I don't know what the criteria is, how we OKR it, but we need to see if the companies are financially successful, if there's stories of workers rebelling, if it worked out well. I don't know, but I think we should just sort of check in 12 to 24 months and see what happens, because the mandates are there. And I think it's been established that on, is it both sides? I think on the return to office side, it's just preference. There's no sort of like, speaking of go read a bunch of papers, I'm not really sure there's a bunch of papers that you can read that say it's a good idea. It just seems to be what people like. As people say over at the Oxide podcast, it's a dress code for going to the office.
Exactly.
Just what they like. So we should check in 12 months, see how it worked out, maybe see if any papers get written about how it actually like created this like boon of productivity that had been lacking. There was some reason why the valuation of all these companies just wasn't going astronomically up, and it had stalled out, and growth was terrible. And it turned out people just needed to be in the office, and now we've got huge growth that's unbelievable and never before seen. That's creating all sorts of shifts.
I will say this. I mean, I think we should definitely do that. I would also say I did listen to a good podcast on The Verge that's in the show notes. That was a pretty level-headed, even, if you will, kind of even-keeled discussion around it. And it was more, I kind of took a lot of things like, if you were looking for how to make remote work in your organization better, they had some interesting tips from some quote unquote experts and people had researched that. So kind of moving beyond the, just like, if you will, the kind of like tier thing, the preference side of it. Like if your preference is like, I want it to work, what could I do to make it work better? There's some practical advice in there, which is probably the next level of this conversation. Like if you wanted it to work, here's some things you could do versus just the blanket statement of like, it can't work and I don't want to talk about it. And 9 out of the 10 people I talk to all believe that I'm right. If you want to get beyond that conversation, listen to the Verge thing and give you some ideas, I'm sure.
That one was great. As a CEO, when I walked around and got random people in the hallway and asked them if they liked what my ideas were, 9 out of 10 of them said yes. And one of them doesn't work here anymore. I think it's the way that kind of surveying goes. Well, speaking of people who don't work here anymore, there have been a lot of bureaucracy things that have come up. I think we've got a couple of listener feedback stuff, not too much. We like to not have too much going on. Otherwise, we try to get rid of those people who bring in too much bureaucracy. So we're at a great level. 9 out of 10 people say they enjoy the amount of bureaucracy that we have, which is what this week, Brandon?
Couple of things here. First, Shahar recommends the Innova Precision Oven 2.0. And so I have an Innova Precision sous vide thing I use. So this is what he said about it in the Software Defined Talk Slack. Here's what it says, quote, "You can literally throw things on the pan and push a button in the app, and it does a better job cooking almost anything than you would in an oven or in a pot. It's like magic." So it is pretty cool. It looks like because I've used the sous vide thing, which has it has Wi-Fi, but it has like a nice interface on your Apple device. And this looks like this idea that says oven. You basically just throw it in, say what it is, and it just figures out how it should be cooked and what temperature and how long. And they have a bunch of cooking guides in there. So I don't know. I've never used it, but because Shahar has such a strong recommendation, seems like a cool oven, seems like a good idea. So let us know if anyone's doing that. It's coming up to Thanksgiving here in the United States. So maybe someone can figure out how to cook a turkey correctly using the oven. That would be fantastic. And also Chris writes in to answer one of your questions, Cote, about T-Mobile. So he says, the way it works is they're all completely separate entities. So Deutsche Telekom has a majority ownership in T-Mobile in the US, but each of the separate T-Mobiles are run individually. So I guess at Cote, if you want to complain about various T-Mobile, you have to complain in the country you're in. So I will say this, though. I have T-Mobile in the US. I think it's been great. I like their simple pricing strategy. So my thing is just to Chris and to everyone there, just don't mess it up. Just keep it just like it is. Don't mess anything up. So I like T-Mobile. I don't know, but I can't speak to T-Mobile or Deutsche Telekom in Europe. Cote, I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. I can't just go, I don't know, fly to Stuttgart and complain at people now about a stupid name from my fiber optic provider. That's, yay, globalization and neocon stuff, I guess. That's great. Well, speaking of things to be appreciative for that happen globally, there's still a few conferences left through the rest of the year. I'll be speaking at SRE Day Amsterdam, November 21st. It'll be very nice. I can just bike there. Depending if it's raining, though, I'll see what happens. But if you still haven't registered for that, you can get 20% off with the code SRE20day. You could try SRE21day and see if you get 21% off. Probably not, but you could try that out. Also, I still haven't figured out making my way to this yet, but there's DevOps Days LA and Scale 22X, March 6th to 9th in 2025. That's next year. That's going to be great. I assume it always is in Pasadena. There's a discount code that has a mysterious amount off. The only way that you'll know is to try to use the code and see what it is, which will be kind of like an early Christmas present for you to see how much you can get off there, or perhaps a conversation topic at Thanksgiving. Did you know I could get this percentage off on my registration ticket? But you should check those out. And there's also Configuration Management Camp is the beginning of February sometime in Ghent. That's also always a nice one to go to. I think when it comes to discount codes, they say we're already very cheap, if not totally free to go to. I don't actually remember. And it gives you a great chance to sample the fine Belgian cuisine of Belgian university students. And you get a whole tray. How do you say it? Vol au vent, which is basically like, imagine a croissant smashed into a cylinder and then pour mushroom gravy with bits of beef on top. And you've got pretty good cuisine at a discount rate. Speaking of things that are at a discount rate, what do you have to recommend this episode, Brandon?
All right, I have two things. One, I already mentioned it, but yeah, go grab a Pixelmeter Pro before it's gone. So get that. And the other one, I'm going to mention just a feature of it. So I'm sure we've mentioned Overcast on here. So that's the podcast player that actually over the summer, I feel like Overcast went through like a midlife crisis. There was a new version of it, had a lot of bugs. It seems like Marco has like stabilized it. But one of the features that I had never used was essentially the queue playlist, right? So it basically is a default playlist in there. And the way I use it is, especially like before I'm going to go usually on a bike ride, is I will just stock up the queue playlist with like the 4 or 5 things I want to listen to. That way it just continuously plays while I'm, riding the bike. I don't have to think about it. And because I don't like, there's a lot of other playlist features in there, and I'd be interested if either of you use them. I don't use any of that, but I like the idea of just sort of, if you will, setting up my workout. So if you will, I don't have to think about it. I can just like finish the whole thing and I have something to listen to the entire time. The rest of the time, I actually just use the main interface and I just kind of scroll through the podcast I have. And I just kind of like randomly pick what I'm interested in listening to at that moment. So I don't know, Cote, maybe I'll start with you. Do you use the queue feature in
I've used it and I want to use it. I think the issue that I have is my podcast listening style doesn't really work for like automatic one after the other. And I think it's not because I'm some sort of fancy lad or anything. I think I just don't have enough podcasts. And so like when I get the podcast that I want, I almost like ceremoniously figured out how to fit it into my day. Right.
Oh, like, I see. So you're not like, you don't have like a backlog you're trying to get through.
That's right. That's right. So I don't just have like, I'm just going to burn through. I'm just going to listen to these 10 different things this week. Now, I have tried to use it and I do like a sort of queue thing. I think that's a good feature. Now I do use the, of course I use the recent thing. That's basically the only way I look at my podcast is whatever's most recent. And I like that, but I've never actually explored the other smart playlists.
Yeah, there's quite a bit. Like, I don't know. I don't use playlists that much in just Apple Music, or like I had Spotify a long time ago. I didn't really, I will use, if you will, the automated playlist, like the ones that it shows or have made for me, but I don't make a lot of my playlists. And I find that I don't want to do that for podcasts either, but I do like, if like I'm going to be out for an hour riding the bike. I like, I don't know, Matt, you're like the athlete here. You're the one that like does like long runs. Like, what do you do?
I have a custom playlist, but it's really just how podcasts get sorted, so I can pick. So the things that I want to listen to, like there's a new software-defined interviews out, and so that moves to the top. So I've got the podcast sorted by listening preference, and then the new episodes of that go to the top or the bottom.
Okay, so you're doing something a little bit more advanced. Like you have important podcasts, right?
Yeah, it's the things that are gonna go bad. I want to listen to the software defined talk and Cloudcast and that sort of stuff. That's at the top. So those feeds move to the top, and then other stuff drops down. And
so those are your priority. I think in the Overcast technology or terminology, is a priority.
But I also I will be like, I don't feel like listening to that right now, and I'll jump down to like a history podcast or something, or economics. Or, so there are the ones that I know I want to consume quickly, and then everything else kind of falls under it. And I do not have the same problem as Cote. I just looked. I have 245 hours of stuff in Overcast.
Yeah, I'm the same thing. I just have so much. It's like, it's never a problem. So I do there is, I guess, for you, Cote, maybe there's a little bit of like eating your vegetables method here. It's like, if there's like a podcast, like you do want to listen to it, like if you sort of like are going to commit to yourself, like I'm going to be doing this thing and I don't have to stop. You can kind of, if you will, sandwich your, if you will, your vegetable podcast in between, like maybe two good ones. Like, okay, I'm going to get through this one. And
maybe but even then,
with something
it's not like their music. It's not like their music tracks. I mean, they're not 3 minutes long. It's like every 40 minutes I have to pick something manually.
Of course we don't mention here. I guess this become a little ad for Overcast, but like, I mean, the reason I stay with Overcast no matter what is the smart speed. The smart speed and the way whatever Marco has done to like replicate like how to make podcasts go faster without sounding weird or high pitched. Like he has perfected this audio engine, which is like, honestly, that is like 95% of the value. Like the UI.
All right. Let's just pivot to my pick because it has to do with this issue.
All right, go ahead.
So my pick is Hardcore History. It's a podcast series. I listened to it with my sons who are big into history, and I bought some old episodes that are from the archives, and they come as MP3s, and I can't dump them into Overcast. So, which means I lose those features. They're just MP3s. Is there a way to like?
I have your answer. I do have the answer. You're not gonna maybe like it. You have to upgrade to the paid.
I'm paid.
Okay.
I pay.
This is what you do. You basically log in on the website. There's a website for Overcast. Not that great. But you log into it, and from there you can upload it. Like there's some limit, but it's essentially infinite, right? Yeah. You upload everything into it, and then you'll have a little uploads folder
like
or
a custom
playlist. Will show up in all of the podcasts. So any type of MP3, like I do this all the time. Even things
that
you want to like
awesome.
rip MP3, log into Overcast, upload the files, and then just sync, and it will all show up on your Overcast thing. So.
This podcast just paid for itself.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. I know you probably love VLC for doing this, Matt, but this is a much better option.
No, I don't. I'm a big Overcast fan. So there's my two picks. The first one, well, 3 picks now. Overcast, pay for it. It's good. Second pick, Hardcore History. They keep like 2 years of backlog online in the feed, but if you want older stuff, you can pay for it, and it's reasonable. Go get it. It's good stuff. My third pick, I kind of mentioned it earlier, was just having a ugly sweater contest. All you got to you get free ugly security sweaters. I mean, who doesn't want that? So the link will be in the show notes. Go get yourself an ugly sweater.
Wow, you can just get one. That's great. Does it have password suggestions on it? It would be nice.
It's terrible. Just go check it out. Yeah,
I like it. All right. Well, my recommendation is I started subscribing to this a couple months ago. I forget. I think it was maybe Ben Thompson interviewed this guy, Tegan Goodard, who runs the site called Political Wire, and it covers U.S. politics, which is just fucking thrilling at the moment. But it's basically like the tech meme of American politics, like crossed with the benefits you get from like a single person curating something and being paid to do it independently. So you kind of read through it, and he does a very kind of like short summary of little things, excerpting stuff. It's fun to read. And then if you pay for the subscription, which I recommend, you get longer posts that he writes. There's only 1 or 2 a week, but then there's also a podcast that you get kind of in the style of dithering, if you're a fan of that he does with someone. And he pretty much copied the same exact format where like, I'm the person who does this work. I'm going to hire someone to interview me about it. And it's a lot more than 15 minutes, but it's a good podcast. And I think his views on things and the way he excerpts stuff is very interesting. Now, speaking of volume, I think maybe this is the highest volume RSS feed I have in my reader. It's if you don't keep on top of it, there's like 100, 120 entries in it. But if you've lived this long in the internet era and you still know what RSS is, I'm sure you have the habit of you just like mark all as read when you're not interested and you move on. But you should check it out if you're interested in a good source of what's going on in U.S. politics. Political Wire, it's good stuff, and the subscription's not that expensive. I think it's pretty nice. Well, speaking of things that aren't that expensive, you've listened to another episode of Software Defined Talk, totally free. Now, this makes me think, if you had to pay to listen to this episode, please tell us so that we can, one, make sure that it's free to listen from that source, maybe even collect some from them. And then two, if you were willing to pay to listen to this, we'd like to talk with you more about some new ideas that we have. So hopefully we'll get an avalanche of emails and we'll start to figure out yet another way to monetize the podcast here. In the meantime, if you'd like to see links to things that we mentioned, recommendations that we made, all sorts of stuff that we said you should check out, if you go to softwaredefinedtalk/493, there's a comma in there somewhere. I bet you can figure out where it belongs. You can find those links and read those things. You can join our Slack channel where we have lots of discussion every week. Many of the links we have come from there and other interesting conversations. And, if you grab one of your coworkers, your friends, your loved ones, your hated, your enemies, people, whether you use Overcast or the podcast app, just look up Software Defined Talk, subscribe it on the podcast. If they listen to it or not, it doesn't really matter. Just make sure they keep downloading it. And with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, Cote. Matt, good as always. Coach, I did have a question for you that I wanted to cover in the after show. You posted what looks like a hack. Maybe this will be yet another recommendation for attending conferences. But it looked like you had somehow on your, if you will, pre-printed badge for the conference you were at. And I'll put a link to, I'll actually put this as the chapter art so you can see it. But somehow you configured it so it says, I think it says I am Cote. So it does not have your first name on there. So my question is how did you achieve? What type of security protocols did you have to break to get that printed on a badge?
Well, it was very complicated, but I didn't have to hang from the ceiling on a monofilament wire. So that was fine. But really, what I did was I just went to where the first name is and I typed in I am. Mm-hmm. And that's it. It's kind of a letdown as far as a hack, but I've tried over the years, often
you just don't know, you don't, at that moment, you don't know how the badge is printed. So it could, depending on where it is, it could be like first name, last name, same, because it worked out really well. This one was sort of like, it was above and below. So it really looked like it was printed correctly. It's like, I am.
Yeah, it doesn't always work out so well. Oftentimes what I'll try is you'll fill out your first name and last name. And then they also ask you what your nickname is or your preferred name. Right. And so I'll often put just Cote, but then it's like Cote, Michael Cote, which looks stupid, right? Like they just print that there. And so this time, I've done this a few times before. Sometimes it doesn't work out very well, but this time it did lay out. And it was funny. I'd kind of forgotten that I did it, and it got printed out. And the lady, the person handed me the badge and she said, "Oh, you are Cote," which is funny. She didn't really give me any guff about it, which is fine. But yeah, you should try that out. I mean, I think this is an underappreciated opportunity with badges. I don't think they really check what you put in there. It's fine. I used to put my Twitter handle and things in there all the time, stuff like that. But you should hack in whatever you want.
No, I like it because I mean it's one of the hardest things though. Like when you're meeting people, oftentimes they're wearing a badge with a name their quote unquote legal name, but that's usually a lot of times it's the name they don't use, right? So it's just it is kind of no, but it's kind of interesting. So I think, well, anyway, good by you. I liked it. I was sort of like, okay, I don't necessarily have that issue, but I'm gonna keep this in the back of my memory just in case I need it for some reason. So
now I guess a real silly season thing would be to put whatever that blank character is in there and see if that validates. That would be fun. Ooh, that might cause all sorts of problems.
Escaping character. Oh, okay, I like that. I like that as well. So all right. Well, if if you go by your last name, I think that's really the use case. If you go by, I guess, no, you can put in any name. I guess if you just want to go by one name and one name only, right? You put I am, and then you put the preferred name in there, and do away with the legal name completely. Just don't put that on there at all. That would be helpful for all of us.
Right. You could be assuming they allow question marks. You could be first name who, last name farted, and I think that would be a great badge.
Right.
I think I might just go with Andy Jassy. Yeah.
I'm updating the middle school presentation on badge etiquette now.
Exactly.
Now that that's come up. Now we have to go teach yet another presentation, Cote. Wonderful. So it's going to be 2 trips to the school. Fantastic. So, all right. Well, for all of those hanging in, appreciate you watching today. Kevin, I see as well. Michael, always on. Hope your pets are doing well. Graham was on, but I think maybe bailed, and Brett as well. So always good to see everyone. And we should be recording, around this time next week. Holiday season will be a little bit sporadic. So we'll have episodes out, but the recording schedule may get, moved around a little bit. So until next time, we'll talk.